I live in a noisy environment. I wear earplugs, but I'm curious, for those of us living in noisy environments or in other environments that might have certain popular sleep prohibitive traits, what would be your go-to recommendations for, you live in noise, this is solution number one, this is solution number two. Oh, you live in a bright environment where there are bright lights or something, here's what I would recommend. I just any tools that seem to be the most reliable.
So this gets at what we call sleep hygiene in sleep research and sleep medicine. So sleep hygiene basically means what are the factors that promote a high quality sleep. And it can be both environmental factors, but it can also be behavioral factors. Like, what can we do? How can we change our behavior to promote healthy sleep? And what kind of environments should we sleep in to promote healthy sleep? I mean, from the environment, it's, bedroom should be dark, quiet, cold, but not too cold.
Is there an optimal temperature?
We did a study where we actually measured all these things in bedrooms in people's homes. And we measured air pollution with PM2.5. We measured CO2 levels, which is typically air quality indicator. We measured temperature and humidity, and we measured the noise. And we got negative associations with sleep quality for CO2, PM2.5, temperature, and noise. And they were all in the direction that higher was always bad. So, I wouldn't say that. I think at some point, if the temperature gets too low, it's actually also not beneficial anymore. And it's like everything in life, there's like a golden middle that's like perfect, right? So you certainly shouldn't like start shivering, right? But it's good if the outside environment is cold enough that you can self-regulate a little bit with your blanket, right? Sticking a foot out of the blanket, and then, if you get too cold, you just, cover yourself with the blanket again. Because actually for the process of falling asleep, our brains need to cool down. So it's very important that we are able to dump some heat into the environment. So if you're sleeping in a very hot bedroom, that will not be possible. So if the bedroom is cold, that's what I do. I stick a foot out. And then at some point, I'm reeling it back in. I don't even realize because I'm sleeping at that point.
What you could tell us about sleep in space?
Yeah, that's certainly how we started. And then my mentor was a long-funded NASA investigator. Because it was like, from surveys, it was known that astronauts are not getting enough sleep when they're in space. And we believe that a lot of that is actually driven not only by the spacecraft environment, but also just by, very much like with us on Earth, by their crazy work schedule that they've got there, right? They have maintenance tasks, they have research tasks, and obviously, the researcher says, "Oh, this is going to take half an hour," and then it takes 2 hours, right? So they're always running over, and of course, like us here on Earth as well, we still want to live a life. Like, they didn't go up on the space station to just, clean it and maintain it and do the research. They also want to look out the window and enjoy time with their fellow astronauts and cosmonauts. So, again, that is at the expense of sleep. So there have been multiple studies showing that on the ISS, astronauts are not getting enough sleep on a chronic basis. They're getting around 6 hours, a little bit above 6. And we already heard earlier that, 7 is kind of like the minimum that adults should get. And then they have like a host of other problems, like, we have like we live a 24-hour day. So every 24 hours, we have a sunrise and a sunset. On the ISS, the International Space Station, it is flying around the Earth, and it's making one circumference every 90 minutes. So every 90 minutes, they have a sunset and a sunrise. Now, granted, there is not a lot of windows in the ISS, which is another problem. That if you don't get these light inputs, and light is the most important circadian entrainer, that it trains us to the 24 days. If you don't have those inputs, or they're like coming at different, timing than the 24-hour day, then your circadian system is running amok, right? It's oftentimes reported in Antarctic research stations, right? During the austral winter, the sun doesn't rise for like 3 months, that people will start what we call behaviorally free running. So, they are now living a 25-hour day and not a 24-hour day. And so they get completely disconnected from their environment because they're not entrained to the 24-hour day anymore. Will also be a problem on Mars, because Mars is like a 24.6-hour day or so. So this is something we can still entrain to as humans. Once we go, out a little bit more extreme, we can't entrain to that anymore. Our circadian system will run on its internal setting. So we need these external cues to basically synchronize our internal clock to our environment. So yeah, that's how it all started. So we did like studies where we had astronauts perform the psychomotor vigilance test every like in the morning and the evening, every 4 days during an ISS mission. We got like 24 astronauts. It's still, I believe, the largest studies that did like investigate sleep and cognitive testing that has ever been performed in space flight. And then as a follow-up project, I always wanted to connect that to the environmental data of the space station. So we got an extra project by the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And we got all the data. We got the radiation data, we got the CO2 levels, the O2 levels, the temperature data, noise levels, although noise is, only measured, in an occupational sense every month, like sporadically. But we were able to connect that to the self-report data and to the performance data. And, we could see how important these individual factors are for astronaut performance, like, radiation exposure, for example, or, CO2 levels and temperature levels, that they all, are also in that environment important for astronauts. We typically call these environments ice environments, isolated, confined, and extreme environment. And certainly the threat to life component is also, very important. There's lots of environmental, operational, and psychological stresses in that environment. And microgravity is certainly, one of the biggest ones. So astronauts need to exercise on a regular basis, because otherwise their cardiovascular system is deconditioning. I mean, on Earth, our heart always has to work against that gravity vector, and that's non-existent nowadays, right? Of the bones, they would like decondition and break easily if they come back to Earth. So that's why they have to exercise. And we see the other thing is that we have this headward fluid shift, right? Again, on Earth, when we're standing, everything is pushed into our legs. All of that is being shifted upwards. So our brains in space are basically compressed at the top of our skull. There's multiple studies showing that the ventricles of the brain that are not containing brain matter itself, but it's like basically filled with cerebrospinal fluid, that these ventricles are getting bigger, and that they're not back to the pre-flight size, even like 7 or 8 months after astronauts return. Obviously, this our vestibular organ that is typically telling ourselves, how we are oriented in space, there is no input for that organ anymore. So, the brain has to totally rewire itself. And, now visual inputs become way more important than the vestibular inputs. It basically has to turn off this input to make sense of the environment. So there's a lot of plasticity going on with the brain. And, we don't fully understand it at this point.